like to call the July 11th, 2017 Shelburne Select Board meeting to order. First item is to consider approval of the agenda. Joe, do you have any suggested changes or anything?
Nope.
Just
Anybody?
a typo on number 18.
Oh, right.
It says lice lumber, it should be rice.
Rice lumber. Different business.
All right, with that change, someone like to move to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Josh, seconded by John. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next is consider approving Select Board minutes of June 27 and July 7th. First is June 27. Does anyone have any proposed changes? If not, someone like to move to approve?
So,
Moved by Mr. Story, seconded by
I'll second.
Mr. Kerr. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
aye.
Move now to July 7th. Anyone have any proposed changes?
No?
Let's see. Josh and John, you guys want to move to approve? And second, one of you guys? You move to approve by
I'll second
Josh,
it.
seconded by John. I only said that, Jerry, because you joined after the first minute or two. So,
It's because I had to wait for the telephone.
it's a brutal thing. Oh, yeah, it's tough. All right, so, but you are in for the, on the call for everything except calling the
Yeah.
meeting to order and considering approval of the agenda, and we told you that, so you can still vote if you feel comfortable with it.
Aye.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item. Public comments. Anyone here like to say something that's not on tonight's agenda over which this board has jurisdiction? Nope. Okay. Select board comments. Josh?
No, I don't have
Jerry?
None.
None.
The only comment I want to make is that Rick Bissett has published some of his poetry in a book that's circulating in various stores around town. And my wife was resting at home after some surgery and got a copy of the book to read and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was amazing to see her smile and laugh, and she really liked it quite a bit. So I encourage everyone in town to check it out. It's a good read.
He has a big night at the Farms, too, a week from
Right,
yesterday, next Monday night.
right. That's it for
It was a
me.
great suggestion you had, Joe, to have a poet laureate.
Thank you. Rick's done a great job.
Can't imagine
Yeah.
someone who has embraced it more. Can you pass that down?
Thank you.
All right, Joe, town manager's report.
Sure. I'll be quick. So July 1st was the beginning of our new fiscal year. So we're in the FY 2018 now. On August 10th, I'll put this in my town manager's report that goes out on Friday with some links. But as Gary also was forwarded, I think something from A&R. On August 10th, there's going to be a public hearing for the 5-year permit renewal of our 2 wastewater plants. My hunch is probably not, it won't be heavily attended, but certainly we will, that's a public hearing put on by the state, not by the town. We're letting them use our facilities here for the public hearing, but I will get the information out. And they are, and the notices and all the corresponding information is posted currently on our website. Make sure we'll make that public. Sidewalk projects start on Friday, so there'll be some, maybe some disruption to traffic patterns, but hopefully the projects will go well. We have issued an RFP for construction management services. If the library building is approved at November 7th, and going into the bond vote, just so the public would have all the information, it would be nice to have our construction manager chosen. So the RFP has been issued. We actually have a site visit on Thursday with anyone who is interested in bidding. They must attend this site visit. And then it's going to be on the select board agenda for August 25th to potentially approve a construction manager for the project. The library director position, we have final interviews for the finalists on Thursday, so that's been moving along, and the trustees have done a good job of managing that project. And this is something that's actually on Peter's budget report for year-end FY 2017 to go along with some of the auditor's recommendations, one of which was to update our personnel policies, which are about 30 years out of date. And today we had a meeting with a consultant from VLCT who will be helping us in that process, and we anticipate that the select board will have that in front of them within 3 months to approve an updated personnel policy. So we're moving forward on that. And I would also like to second what John said about Rick Bissett, and also mention that other communities around have contacted me about the success of our Poet Laureate program. The most recent being Plattsburgh, New York, who implemented a very similar program modeled after Shelburne because they saw the success that we have had, and Rick has certainly embraced that and done just a tremendous job. So I second what John has said. Thank you.
Thanks. Item number 7, public hearing to consider adopting zoning bylaw amendments proposed by the Planning Commission to remove size restrictions on daycare centers located within the mixed-use district, and definition of a new use to be known as local market with delicatessen, and allowance of local market with delicatessen as conditional use in the Shelburne Falls zoning district. So I would like to open the public hearing on this, and Dean, I understand you're going to give us a quick presentation.
I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
If that pleases the board. Included in your packets was, I believe, a reduced size version of the slides that I'm going to show here, which are pretty limited, pretty straightforward. The Planning Commission, as sometimes happens, was approached by 2 different parties about 2 different aspects of the zoning regulations that they had indicated that they would like to see changed. The Planning Commission heard the requests. They developed some simple proposals that addressed the core issues that were raised by those folks. They warned the public hearing on it, and they've advanced a proposal to you. There was actually a third piece of the zoning regulations that they, after holding the public hearing, decided that it did not actually clear the commission, and it's something that they will take up again. The sections of the bylaw that are changed, I'm showing this slide just because it's one of the things that statute requires us to do in a legal notice. It's Article 9, it's Article 10, and it's Article 21. Article 21 is the definition section. Article 9 and 10 are 2 different districts, the mixed-use zoning district and the Shelburne Falls district. And the way that we typically do this is the convention of underscore and strike through, underscores indicating new text, and strike through is text that would be removed. The pieces that are proposed to be changed have to do with child care centers, specifically child care centers in the mixed-use district, and neighborhood market with deli. As far as child care center piece of the proposal, the edit that the Planning Commission is proposed to be making in response to this request is to strike the words "with a maximum of 75 children" from Article 10. The issue was raised by someone who owns a property. One of their tenants conducts a daycare, a child care center, and they are currently limited by the cap of 75, and the Planning Commission has agreed to remove that cap. It would remain a conditional use, so a change in the size of the property or in the use would go back to the Development Review Board for an amendment to an earlier approval. So it would still be subject to conditional use review, which looks at impacts on municipal facilities and things that are normally considered important when judging a new use. The second area is what's called neighborhood market with deli, and the proposed edit is to add a new item to the list of conditional uses in the Shelburne Falls district. The Shelburne Falls district is the area, not surprisingly, around Shelburne Falls, comes west towards the intersection of Marset Falls and Mount Philo, but doesn't quite reach it. So a new use would be added to the list called local market with delicatessen, and a definition for that use would be added. And the definition has been circulated, it's been on the website, and it basically spells out the activities that would be allowed. The party that made this request has been involved through the process. They commented, so their concerns, we believe, are addressed. The background, just coincidentally, is there was a property in the Falls that had been used as a market. A market is not explicitly allowed in that district. They changed the use to a conforming use, a professional office. Their tenant moved away, and then they realized that they did not automatically have the right or the ability to apply to go back. So this change to the regulations would mean that they could apply. And if they get through the conditional use process, then they would have the ability to conduct that use in that location. That's the scope of the changes.
So when it was originally a market, that was grandfathered in?
Well, the situation is a little bit more complicated. The zoning for the town many years ago had the larger village area, I will call it, as one zone. There had been some work done that had contemplated the village being divided up into 4 or 5 different pieces, but the zoning in effect for many, many years had the village all as one zone, and a market was an allowed use at that time. The plan for the town changed, and it adopted this concept of smaller districts, more refined districts. That concept that was in the plan was brought over to the zoning regulations, but in the course of adopting the zoning regulations, there was a lot of interest expressed by the folks in the Shelburne Falls district in keeping it the way that it is. So that meant that the list of allowed uses was relatively constrained. I don't think so the market that was there could continue to operate. I don't think anybody contemplated a situation where someone would operate the market, change it to something that conforms, and then think they would go back. And that's where the rub is.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
No?
Anyone here have anything they'd like to ask? Joy, you got anything? Good? Dean?
I
You
don't
good?
think we've received any comments, public or
I
otherwise,
haven't-
since it's been publicized, so.
All right, so I don't see any reason why we can't have a motion to close the public hearing then.
So moved?
Moved by Jerry. Someone like to second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, someone we can consider, if you guys like, going forward and amending the zoning bylaw right now. So if someone would like to make a motion to, I think we can do both at the same time. It's not very controversial. Someone want to?
I would move adoption.
Adoption to amend the zoning bylaw summarized as removing the size restriction on daycare centers located in the mixed-use zoning district and definition of new use to be known as local market with delicatessen and allowance of local market with delicatessen as a conditional use in the Shelburne Falls zoning district was warned for public hearing for today. Right?
Correct.
Moved by Jerry, seconded
Second.
by Josh. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks to
Dean.
you guys.
Appeal, or petition by 5% of the voters, this would go into effect in 21 days.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, Gail, we're at number 8. You know, the Yankees have 2 number 8s retired. Bill, the Yankees have 2 number 8s retired, both in the Hall of Fame. Bill Dickey and Yogi Berra.
Well, I'm not retiring.
We know that. All right, so this is our CBC annual report from the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee.
Okay, so you all have written copies of this, and I don't know if you want me to actually read this and go through it, or if you want to simply ask questions or just a summary of some key points.
I think give the Reader's Digest summary for the general public would be great.
Okay, so you asked us about our mission and charge, and that remains the same. That was revised, I think, back in 2005 or 2006, and it hasn't changed appreciably. you asked about ways to increase diversity on the committee. I think that our committee represents a diverse sort of set of backgrounds in terms of the educational or interest backgrounds of the people on the committee. And insofar as Shelburne is not a highly diverse community, I'm not sure what means we could use to make it a more diverse committee, except to say that we welcome participation by anybody in town, and we are down one member and we're looking for another. So I think that covers that question. In terms of our accomplishments since our last report to the Select Board, we have finally completed work and editing of the open space plan, and we hope that it'll be published very shortly. After a review by you, which I think is going to happen later this month.
I think the next meeting.
At the next meeting,
Scheduled.
yeah. As part of our charge, we've also offered comments on a lot of important development proposals that came before the DRB, and are still underway with proposals such as the one for Quiniosca and several of the other larger proposals that have come before us. We've participated in the discussion of form-based zoning. We've initiated regular collaboration with the Planning Commission about revising the zoning regulations and the plan for the rural district. And this is something that I'll address later when we talk about our key plans for the year. We've also participated in discussions about value-added agriculture. We've worked with planning and with Chris Cole to increase our knowledge of stormwater issues. We've met with experts. We've participated in Heinsberg's project to better understand water quality. We've participated in a Planning Commission visit by a member of the state committee, Jens Hilke, who did a really useful presentation, and then individuals among us, some of whom have background specifically in that area, have done additional research or participated in webinars and that sort of thing. We've tried to maintain close communication with Chris regarding water quality. We've worked with the Lewis Creek Association on improving the quality of water and removing invasives. We've started some volunteer projects to remove invasives from some of the waterways in town. We've hosted an event to inform the public about water quality. We've welcomed some new members, lost some unfortunately who moved away or had to leave for other reasons. And so that's kind of a quick summary. In terms of our three primary goals, one is to continue the work that we're doing with the Planning Commission. We had a very good retreat several weeks or maybe months ago now to begin and open that discussion about looking at ways to better preserve the rural zone and to look at what kinds of regulations and plan visions would preserve that zone in the best way that will protect both natural resources and water quality, and also add to the quality of life of people in the area. And we have played an active role with the Lewis Creek Association and with the Winooski Valley Park District to take steps to prevent McCabe's Brook, which is probably next in line for becoming an impaired waterway. And so one of our goals is to see what can be done proactively to avoid that happening. In terms of making our meetings more effective, the one thing that I came up with, we might be able to try to make them shorter, but we have good discussions. And we probably hold the record for having the latest meetings to end of any committee in town. But the other thing that I did mention was several years ago, we had a member who had hearing impairment, and he had difficulty following the conversation in meetings. We had at that point asked for some kind of technology to help make the meeting more accessible to him or for anybody who might want to come. And nothing materialized from that. So if we were looking at something that would make our meetings or any meetings more accessible, I would think about looking at things that would help people with those kinds of disabilities to better participate. Regarding the question of economic development, I think certainly our point of view was and is that natural resources help maintain the quality of life in town and also add a great deal to the economic development of town. If you have a town that really looks beautiful and is welcoming in terms of its flora and its fauna and the overall environment, people are going to come and want to visit. Shelburne is noted as a tourist attraction, and I think when people come here, that means they spend money on lodging, they spend money on restaurants, they spend money in our shops, they go to the farmer's market. And so maintaining and really protecting our natural resources from that perspective is something someone might not expect of natural resources, but I think it is definitely a benefit. We also feel like stormwater management is something that is really critical to the economic development of town. Whether we're thinking about growing businesses, growing industry, or growing the population of town, or just maintaining the quality of life here, the quality of the water around us is really a critical element. And having the opportunity to be proactive, as I mentioned before about McCabe's Brook, so that it doesn't become impaired is an important element that I think will help with our economic development. It will also help if we can avoid future costs that that emit from having poor water quality or having a lot of runoff and stormwater impact. So in all of those ways, I think natural resources is something that does perhaps surprisingly affect our economic development. And then the last thing that I think I pointed out was there have been a lot of sewer overflows and other kinds of accidents with respect to our sewage and our water processing plant. That's not casting aspersions on Chris or on anything that's done there, but I do think that it behooves us to really look critically at the how outdated some of our equipment might be, and to make sure that we address those kinds of issues before we have another crisis, as opposed to waiting until it happens to fix it. Finally, well, it's not finally yet. I think the next thing you asked was about the student internship program, and we've had 3 student interns. We currently have a student intern who is fairly young. He's a sophomore in high school. He has been an intern with us for something over a year, and his participation has been really, really outstanding. So much so that when we had an opening on the committee, he was promoted to have a full-time position, and he has really offered, is he here? No, he's not.
But he's young enough to be a student.
Pardon?
He's young enough to be a student.
But in any case, he's been an outstanding member of the committee. He's
good.
recruited student volunteer projects for some of the invasives removals that we've done. He's always there with ideas, and he's a regular attendee at our meetings. If I have any recommendations about the program, I have a couple. One of them is my background as an educator was in service learning, which means that it's a way that students can connect learning with the service, community service that they do. And one of the ways in which we implemented that was to have an opportunity or a program whereby, whether it was related to their educational program or not, for them to reflect on what they're learning and to do that together and be able to extract from the experience that they're having things that they learn on a broader level. And I think that could be a helpful addition that could include some readings. Might not be something that they want to do, but it might be something to think about. And then the other thing I would suggest is that not every student who has come forward, from what I understand from committees, has been as committed as this student has been. And if there were some way in the interview process to assess whether their interest in being on the committee is to put something on their resume, or whether it is to actually participate and learn something out of the experience, and whether they have the commitment to attend every meeting, or at least as many as is feasible. So those would be some suggestions I have. And then finally,
Aren't you glad you asked for a summary?
No, it's good.
well, it's hard to summarize. That's why our meetings go so long. Finally, you had asked whether there anything else that we wish to report. And it's come to our attention that, in fact, I don't know if it's a regulation, maybe Dean could explain or whatever, that it's expected that developers, because part of our role is to review projects that might have natural resource impact. So for developers to come to us prior to going to the DRB, because of the meeting schedules, we meet once a month. Many of the other committees meet more frequently or meet perhaps right after we do. And sometimes the timing isn't perfect for us to be able to have that opportunity to review things. And so if there were a way to be able to facilitate that process and make it clear that our review has value, I think we would have a greater impact in what we do.
I'm glad you brought that up. Frankly, that was the main focus of what I wanted to ask you about, if you guys don't mind. And that is the procedure. Because I know your board wants to have the opportunity to comment to the DRB. You are an advisory board, they're a quasi-judicial board. And I do know that developers are frustrated when they go to the DRB, and they have a couple of meetings, and then near the end of their time before the DRB, they get a report from your board, and they feel like that should have happened earlier in the process. So I'm trying to determine, how can we help to facilitate this in a way that you have an opportunity to provide your input, and at the same time, the developers have the ability to go forward in a timely manner?
Well, one of the things that I think would help would be to make it clear to developers that the expectation is that they would come before us before they take their project to the DRB. That doesn't always
So have you
happen.
spoken to the DRB about their rules of procedure?
No. I don't know what the source of that requirement or that suggestion that people come to us first was, but I think it's something that if it was not present before, it has only recently come to the fore as being recognized. And so I think it's not absolutely clear to people who might be coming forward with the project that it's an expectation that they do that.
I know it's
The-
hard because you guys meet once a month.
We do.
The DRB meets twice a month.
And
if you have
sometimes,
comments, the developer hears your comments, then they, before the DRB, they get their comments, and if they have to go back to you, the cycle is just extended and extended. And
It-
so,
it
and
is-
this has been the way it's been for years. It's been very frustrating, and it has caused problems for people
Yeah.
on every side.
and I think that the problems have been exacerbated with the new ethics rules, because we used to be able to have those discussions if we got a proposal from a developer. We used to be able to have those discussions online. we can't do that anymore.
You mean the
So we
open
have
meeting laws?
the open meeting laws, yeah. And so with the open meeting law, it makes it much more difficult for us to expedite those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. We gotta figure out some way to,
You know, I
To make it
think
work
it's
better.
clear that the Planning and Zoning Office can probably give a heads up to developers whose projects would be subject to that kind of review, because not every request before the DRB is subject to a natural resource impact. For instance, the changes for the number of children in a daycare is probably not a major natural resource impact unless they're playing in the river. But if the DRB could give that heads up and flag those projects early enough in the process that the developer can come to us sooner and prior to taking their initial project, they can at least take into account what we've said if they care to. And we can submit our comments in a timely way.
yes, Evan?
Yeah, that was one of my comments, too. I have several others. As usual, you've provided us with an extremely thoughtful piece.
Thank
I look forward to yours and Dorothy's, and am not disappointed so far. I was on the other side of this DRB issue, and it's equally frustrating for that board, no doubt for applicants. And my sense of it was, it's a little asymmetrical, because a lot of the comments that are sought are staff and are fairly immediately gained. I mean, or at least Joe can manage those so that the timing questions are met. The one that always seemed to be kind of off on its own was your committees. And sometimes just vacations and change meeting dates throw it off too. I remember one was you were 3 weeks later than the application having been presented. I'm sure you sense a commitment on the board's part that we wouldn't have a committee without its voice being heard, especially where it most needs to be heard. And I'm sure the DRB, again, feels the same way. So I'd be very hopeful that there'd be some means for us. This was a comment in your report last year, and I'd be very hopeful that we could figure out some method here to some rhythm that could be established that is not that doesn't violate norms or the open meeting law, because I really think the contribution the committee makes to development review is pretty essential.
Thank you.
Do you know, Jerry, if other communities, their natural resources board meet more often than once a month?
Well,
Or
we've
do you know?
spoken about the fact that perhaps biweekly meetings would be a way to resolve this, or that you might be able to identify a period of time in the year when applications are more frequent than not. My experience has been that means were always sought, not always successfully, because you're dealing with volunteers and open times where with competing holidays, school holidays and whatnot. We're all volunteers, we're all subject to competing interests and priorities. But I think the important point here is that this is a pretty essential ingredient in development review. And aside the fact we've made an effort to create this body, much like Dorothy's, with important jobs. And it seems to me that hopefully there's a way to establish some kind of rhythm in the internal process, either through Dean and Kate or in coordination with the Development Review Board itself. So
You know,
I think you raise a very important point, and
the open meeting laws now provide that you can meet by telephone, as long as there's a location where, if anyone wants to come in to make comments. So you could have extra meetings if you wanted to, and everyone call in.
But how would others participate? how
Well-
non-members participate
Well,
that
they
way.
can, you have a location where one person must attend. We did this, we set our tax rate last week.
Yeah.
Joe, I think, was the only person at the meeting, and everyone else called in. And, Peter, of course. Sorry, Peter. And, that's a way of doing it, so you don't have to physically go there except for one person.
Yeah, one of the other challenges, I have to say, is that there are times when our committee might have to make a statement at a select board meeting, at a DRB meeting, and at a planning commission meeting, all in 1 week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I'm often the one who has to do that. And we also have the same meeting night as the DRB. So if we do appear personally at the DRB meeting, and it happens to be on a night that it is also our meeting, then our meeting has to be interrupted to do that. So there are definitely challenges that are worth trying to puzzle out.
One thing I recall is that we set up regular, in this case, bi-weekly meetings with an open agenda, a sort of an as-needed agenda, so that notice was given ahead of time to meet the requirement of notifying the public of a potential meeting. And it simply had an agenda item to review a proposal or an application before the Development Review Board. I mean, just a simple, because you wouldn't necessarily know in advance, obviously, which one. But I'd certainly encourage, and I'm sure Joe's got a head full of solutions already, that after several years of this,
Well,
yeah.
Well, I was going to chime in. I mean, you might not want to hear my suggestions, actually, but, Dean and I have been talking about this a little bit more frequently, and, I mean, I'll just be candid, my comments to Dean. I think if I had a wish, either our committees would meet half as often as they do. I'm being honest about that because, Dean's got 2 planning commission meetings. He comes to the select board meeting. He's got 2 HPDRC meetings a month. He's got the bike ped. He's got SNRCC. It's kind of madness, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So either I think we need to figure out with all of these, for all of our committees, if we really want them to provide the type of input that I think they want to submit, and what I think the board might want them to submit. I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I think we're talking about a staffing problem, and that we need, we can't give these boards and these committees the level of service that they may want with our current staffing in the planning and zoning department, and that's just a fact. So I think that's something that needs to be talked about comprehensively during the budget season.
Yeah, that's
If
good.
in fact, these are the type of input that SNRCC and HPTRC and the bike ped committees and the rest of them, if that's a desire, I don't think that we can provide it with our current level of staffing.
Right, Joe, we don't want to hear your comment.
With the chair's permission, that's a nice introduction to one of my other points, which was your comment about maintaining
Excuse me,
town.
Jerry, before we go on to that topic, we have someone who'd like to
Oh,
say something.
sorry.
Is that okay?
My apologies.
Sure. Just microphone, please. I'm sorry, I just wanted.
Oh, no, I didn't see him.
Don Rendell, I'm a member of the committee. 2 quick points. One, on the telephone issue, speaking from the experience of calling in from some distance to meetings, it was essential dialing in on a Skype line to be able to have the visual of the plans that are being discussed.
I get that.
And even there, it was often hard for me, from that perspective, to be able to follow really the developers.
Those plans could be sent to you in advance, and then you could open them up on your laptop.
Yeah,
Within the last month, we have a new phone system in the town, so it should be much better from now on when people have conference call meetings.
That's a good point, Don.
the other point is, I wonder if we could make a quick study on seasonality of development to see if there is a season when it does happen that we might be able to take a look at that rush in a different way.
Thanks, Don. All right, Jerry, please.
Thanks, Don. The second point I wanted to commend you in making is the suggestion about the gathering the student members. And it seems to me that's a really great idea. And it wouldn't surprise me that there are several of the board have children of or near that age or just recently, and I'm sure would be ideal hosts for such a thing, along with Joe. I think that continuation of their experience and not just an exit interview would be a really good idea.
Thank you. And just as another point that I didn't put in here, so it's not repetition. I have an acquaintance who's on the select board in Middlebury who heard about in the newspaper our internship program and is very interested in having that spread geographically. So,
Colchester adopted it as well.
We're trendsetters.
And with the chair's permission, my third point regards, now that Joe has broken the ice and set the stage, and a potential for budget discussion, and that's maintenance of town recreation and conserved spaces. I really feel pretty strongly about that. I mean, and I'm very glad to see that that's an interest that you're taking along with Rec and sitting with the Bike and Pedestrian Committee the other night. They too are also interested. And my hope is that when we are in budget, that we'll have some proposals in front of us that address that whole issue. You must conserve what you have before you go out and ask for more. And I was very glad to see that mentioned.
Point. Gail, how long have you been on the board? Like 90 years?
I think maybe 89. No, I think it's about 23 to 25, something like that.
Wow.
I'd like to gather some of the comments that have been made. And we've had a number of conversations about the whole, technological improvements. And I think that's something that I think we really do need to address moving forward. I think a lot of these things can be facilitated with some technology improvements. And your point about the hearing impaired, I don't think has ever come up. So if you had any ideas for that, that would be helpful. But
Yeah, I'm sure that there must be an organization in town that can give us insights as to what the appropriate technology would be to make that accessibility more accessible.
But I think just the idea of providing sort of alternative opportunities for a meeting and comment is things that have been brought up in the past, and I hope we can really move forward with that.
Yeah, and I think that would really also help to address the question of diversity on the board.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions or anything for this topic?
Thanks, Don, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. What do you think of Gail thinking that you were the student member? You look so young. All right, our next item is our CBC annual report from Historic Preservation and Design Review Committee, Dorothea Pinar, mother of the opera singer. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I actually thought Fritz was going to be here to do this report, and he's not here. So do we have a copy of, oh, great, because I don't even have a copy of it. All right. That's okay, I can go with it. Basically, I'm going to do a much quicker job than Gail because I'm less prepared, frankly. Thank you.
It's fair.
Really, we haven't had too many changes. I'm just going to make some highlights. We also, like natural resources, we worked with the Planning Commission about the form-based zoning and protecting the historic sites along Route 7, which wasn't in the initial drafts. The guidelines, we've been using our new design review guidelines, and we're quite proud of them. They were actually presented at the state historic preservation meeting this year, and people were, fascinated and asked us if it was online. I said yes, indeed. So I think we're going to be again on the cutting edge of what we've done with design review. We do not have a student on our because we meet during the day. We're one of the few, I think the only group that meet in the morning. So it does preclude our high school students from working with us. However, as the president of the Historical Society, we really are going to be trying to get some students to work with us. And there's a lot of overlapping interest between historic preservation and the history. You can get people involved in preservation issues by getting them involved in the history. And so hopefully we're going to be working with some of the local high schools, doing some scanning once we get our website going, and maybe even some cemetery tours where they get to act out things and different things, getting people encouraged. So we have that through the Historical Society interest. We do, we always want to be increasing our listings of buildings on the National Register. So we do have the Falls District, which we've had that, a draft of that. We still need to get it across the finish line. There's some edits that the Historic Preservation Officer wanted us to make on the delineation of the boundaries. And also, by the time we did the draft, we had students at UVM that helped us with that. They have different requirements for, we don't have to do black and white photographs and that sort of thing, which is great. It saves us a great deal of money. So we just have to get that done. The more buildings we have in the National Register, the more that people can use the tax benefits for if they have income property. So that's an important thing. So, because we have a lot of buildings that are historic resources that are deteriorating, and we want to find ways to incentivize people to not do demolition. So that's, having things on the National Register will help us. It also helps us with things like when AOT wants to put new roads, like a 4-lane through the village and that sort of thing. They have to go through a review. The village proper is on the National Register, but the design review district is larger than the National Register district and the boundaries. I guess I'm just going to get right down to the things that we also talked about hearing impaired in our report, actually, because we had some older members in our group that had problems with the meetings. So we would like to have some kind of way of enhancing for people who are older, who are on a commission, because frankly, people who are older, who are retired, have the time to be on these commissions, so it works, like myself, for instance. Currently, we have a full 7-member complement, so we're not looking for members except for replacing myself, perhaps, this coming year, which, as most people know, that I live in South Burlington now, but have decided to stay on the commission, but we're looking for somebody with the sort of preservation skills that can step in, and hopefully somebody from Shelburne, because I think it's important, just politically, if you have to say no to somebody, it's always better if you live in the community and you feel, But I'm not disappearing. I've been on the commission, it'll be 26 years in September, so it's like it's time for new blood, please. So anyway, I will let you know in the spring when it comes time for that. But right now we have a full 7 members, which is great. We have, our biggest challenge is that this year we have reviewed 2 demolition permits, and we have a 3rd one that we're reviewing now. This is a concern I've had as a preservationist, because I've seen it in other communities. When you have greater density and the land itself is very valuable, the little historic building on that land becomes not valuable in some ways. Of course, in a cultural way, it's very valuable. For our tourism, for economic development, I believe it is very important. But we need to incentivize people to maintain the buildings, because we have some that are just, frankly, just people can't, I don't know if it's financial or other reasons why the buildings are deteriorating. But other developers might say, you know, we can just let this neglect, demolition by neglect happen and take it down. You know, just say we can't, you know, restore it, there's no way to do that, blah, blah, blah. And the land is very valuable. They can build more on that spot. So we have to look for ways to incentivize, and revolving funds are one of the ways other communities have done it, where you have like loans, low interest loans that you have, you know, a fund that you can give to people who qualify to do maintenance, basic painting, fix up, so that things will not fall apart. Tax incentives is another one. You know, a limited time frame for a person who's put out that kind of money to do a restoration. And also density bonuses for some of the larger lots in the village, for instance, where we have a historic resource right on the road, which most of them are, and they have a big lot. Perhaps renovating that historic building will cost them a little more than they think they're going to be able to get out of it. Give them a density bonus. So we need to work with Planning Commission, because that's, you know, density is what we want, but it's a two-edged sword, and it's something that a lot of places.
We do have a density bonus, don't we? We do have a density bonus for extraordinary,
Exceptional design.
exceptional design, but, and exceptional design is very difficult to define.
Well, it's also the limited area
Yeah.
where you're eligible.
So we need to really work with the Planning Commission yeah, we do want density, that's great, but it's really putting pressure. So if we lose 3 buildings a year, we don't have a district. We won't even be able to maintain the fabric to have a national registered district. We will have lost that much of, and you don't want to see that happen. Now, you might say, oh, Dorothea, that's just, you know, I've seen it happen. And I've been in many cities where, yeah, it starts happening and it goes very quickly. Places like Ann Arbor, where I started my career in '78, it was at a tipping point. We were losing a lot of buildings. We started putting local districts, and people saw a benefit, an economic benefit. Neighborhoods were very desirable. So people started coming to us and saying, can you make a district in our area? So we had a backlog of, you know, putting historic districts. It really stopped that you know, the places where they were putting students in, these brick boxes. It stopped that happening, and the city still has maintained its historic character and is one of the great Midwest cities as a result.
My daughter lives there.
So we can and should be looking for ways to incentivize, because we really are starting to see these demolition. And I can think of 3 or 4 buildings that are on, you know, that tipping point right now. The other issue that came up, it comes up periodically, is that people have great ideas about, you know, projects they can do in the village and different things. Sometimes it comes out with our scouts who want to build things and such. It's always important for select board members and other members in other committees to remember that we have plans that for our open spaces, our community spaces already, and that things do need to come to us, because we don't want them to go down the road of planning something and then get tremendously disappointed when they come to us and it's like, it isn't on the plans. So, you know, so if somebody comes with an idea, it really is great for them to come to us early, and we can direct, sort of like what happened with the vet project, where there were, in the initial plans, didn't fit into the overall scheme, and we were able to, you know, revise plans, get that done in a good way. So just to remind select board members that, yeah, don't say yes to something if it's in the design review district. It does need to go through design review too. Otherwise, you know, I'll just answer any questions you might have about Fritz's report.
Thanks. Anybody?
I'm good.
I was very taken by your comments about economic development and the important role that historic properties play, much less that we are an historic property ourselves altogether. And it's very reassuring when you think about some of these things on your own, away from meetings, that we have persons like yourself and the committee who are looking after these questions. So I really was taken by that comment, and I appreciate it.
I found out this, I didn't realize that Shelburne was one of two communities that were the original CLG, Certified Local Government Communities. I didn't even know that, so we have a long tradition here.
Anyone else? Dorothea, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dorothea.
All right, our next item is item number 10. Georgine is here for this. Consider a request from the Social Services Committee to use $1,000 from the Community Fund. Welcome and talk to us.
Well, actually, we thought it would just come from our budget, not necessarily the community fund. But the Shelburne, the Social Services Committee has developed a kind of a questionnaire form, and we've been interviewing different agencies. We of course, would only give money through an agency, not to an individual. And Age Well serves low to moderate income individuals, families with an income, a single person, an income below $990 a month, or a two-person household below $1,335 a month. So this is a vulnerable population, which fits in with our charter. The funding would be used, half of it would be used to provide 2 weeks on a meal route for Meals on Wheels. And the other one is the program that AgeWell sponsors through the Dutch Mill Restaurant. Once a month, they have a certain number of tickets that go on sale for $5 to people eligible for that. And they can go to the Dutch Mill. And what she explained to us is that Meals on Wheels can be isolating in the sense that people are in their homes and the meal comes to them. But many seniors are still able to, they're socially deprived and they need to get together with each other, and this is a way for them to be able to do it. So they have several restaurants that are participating, but in Shelburne, it's the Dutch Mill Restaurant. And the last thing I was going to say is that we have developed some criteria for how we want to spend the money, and we look to see if it's a local agency, the size of the request, the number of Shelburne residents affected, whether it's a vulnerable population, which we consider 0 to 6 years old or 60-plus years old, socioeconomic status, and how accountable they are. And AgeWell provided us with statistics that show that they've had 203 services provided to the town of Shelburne in the last year. So we thought that it was a pretty reasonable request.
Thank you. Joe, looks like you're ready to say something.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to check both with Georgine and Peter. I want to make sure I understand that. So when you say you want this, and maybe I didn't understand you when you came to see me on Friday, the community fund is your budget, unless you're talking about the money that
No, I'm talking about.
typically goes to United Way or has in the past.
No, I'm just talking about the budget for 2017-18, which is available as of July 1st, my understanding.
The money that used to go to United Way.
That used to go to United Way. Last year's money went to
Now I
United.
understand the request.
Because I might as well say this now, I was new to this committee, everybody was new to this committee, and we didn't quite get that we had to fill out this form in order to have the money dispersed. So the money to United Way was never dispersed, although it's in the minutes. And last year, and is committed to the United Way, but they still haven't gotten it yet. So we have to go through that formal.
But that's for this past year.
That's for the past year. But for this year, this is only $1,000 out of our new budget, and we think it's money well spent for the people in Shelburne. What do you think?
I'm just wondering about just procedure here. If this is for the new budget going forward, and I think there's 40,000, is that it, Peter?
It's
For-
3.8 for the community
Yeah,
fund.
yeah, total of 40,000, and now you, usually in the past, I think the committee, from a procedural standpoint, would allocate the entire fund at once, even before they did all of it going to United Way. Before that, they would get all their requests. Frankly, would go through Judy Lance when Paul Boney was there, and she'd go through all of them, and then a determination would be made by the
How to
committee
distribute
how
the money.
to divide it up rather than piecemeal.
Uh-huh.
So this is a different way of doing it, and I just wanted to make sure it made sense to your committee to do it in a piecemeal, because if someone else comes back and you decide, we could have used it for this instead, the money
Right.
will be gone. But
Well, I did send out requests, this form that we designed, to all of the people that we had present to us. And Agewell is the first one that came back, as well as United Way, and they want the whole $40,000 again. So, but we don't have a lot of history on our committee, because
about how it happened.
it's a whole new,
Right.
committee.
Also, I think we heard you loud and clear when we all were appointed to the board, or to our.
Could you just grab a mic, Thanks.
I think we heard you loud and clear when we were all appointed to be on the committee, that it seemed that having all that money go to the United Way was not really what the select board wanted to happen again. And so we took that into consideration over the past year as we did a needs assessment. And so it is a little, we're not giving it all out at once, because we want to see where the needs are. And come wintertime, there may be more need in Shelburne for people who need it for fuel, or
This is, the idea of doing it piecemeal is new to me. I
Yep.
don't necessarily have anything against it.
Yeah.
It's just a departure from
Right.
past practices, and I'm going back the 9 years I've been on this board.
Yep.
It's a departure from the entire period.
So we didn't know about that.
it seems to be what is right for this committee at this time. A year from now, we may have a different strategy, but it seems to be,
I'm a big believer in trying to support the
yeah.
committees, which is frankly, I wasn't in favor of giving all the money
Right.
to United Way, but I voted in favor of it every year
Yeah.
out of respect for the committee.
But we heard you when we got appointed.
I think this is terrific
Oh, good.
on several accounts. And I shouldn't have been surprised, but it follows an equally innovative presentation that you made in the spring. But this matrix, which obviously guides your decision-making and distributes funds in some measure of need, as well as coverage, call it, I'm an amateur, so I'd say coverage of sectors, is a really, really major accomplishment. That's, if you're being given money to spend under controlled circumstances, it seems to me this is an ideal way to get it kind of organized and reassure, and this is to be positive about Gary's comment, reassure the board that you are addressing the variety and diversity of needs that a United Fund or some other umbrella organization might. It also addresses a point several of us made about Shelburne money going to Shelburne. And I think this is terrific.
Great.
I mean, as a piece of guidance, I call it a matrix, it could be a chart, whatever you've, and I assume you've developed this on your own?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Well,
just
the whole
fantastic.
committee did.
For those of you who don't have the benefit of looking at it, what it does is it has categories: nutrition, shelter, health, clothing, childcare, education, community justice, and transportation, and then lists in Shelburne those that are either doing it or the needs that are apparent, and then moves gradually to the point of supporting financially and morally organizations that address those needs. I mean, it's a comprehensive way of dispersing, a budget fund. I just think it's a terrific job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll just second Jerry's. I mean, it seems like it gives both the committee a lot of flexibility to address the needs as they see it. And I think as long as the committee has that energy to go through that process, then I think it is a very positive thing for the town to be able to do that.
Thanks. I have a, go ahead.
I just would add one more comment that, since we all worked to put a budget together, in theory, we've approved some funding to execute these type of things. So certainly Joe's office can take care of this, and, you don't have to come to a meeting with us every 2 weeks to make disbursements, right? Because the whole idea behind this is to be effective, and to be effective quickly. Because as you just said, you never quite know when you might need to do something. So to wait for us to be here to listen and, kind of digest this and then say, oh, yeah, it's okay, it doesn't add much value to it, in my opinion, The heavy lifting we did in the fall was to approve the budget, so the committee was, in theory, empowered. The checks and balances are Peter and Joe in the sense of making sure the process is used.
Joe, isn't the rule, if,
So this, I guess this is a change, and I guess I'm looking at Peter to make sure that this makes sense to you. I mean, the community fund is explicit. It says that the select board must approve over $500 any disbursement.
I don't know if this
So
is an enterprise fund.
Well, this is a different, now I'm more clear of what line item you're talking about. So we almost, now that we know what the Social Services Committee is, the way that this group is going about their business, which makes perfect sense to me, I think we do need to solidify a mechanism for approving these. I mean, it makes sense to me that if this is the way that this group wants it to go, they don't need to come to the select board for
Yeah,
$1,000
I think
here,
it'd be good to have
$1,000
a
there.
procedure set
But we should
forward,
have a procedure.
mechanism. But we don't, I think, I hope everyone agrees, if you're gonna give $500 to this organization, $250 to this, that would be a lot.
those amounts are covered. We can do those, but what I heard John say is that, what I heard you say is that since you approved our $40,000 budget, 2,000 community fund, 38,000 for our whole committee budget, that we don't have to come to the select board for that $38,000
No,
disbursement?
You're gonna disperse against that through Peter and Joe, as you normally would.
Okay.
So just as you're representing it
Is that-
here.
Well, I think,
So-
I think the board should then adopt a policy.
I think we need some type of mechanism. I think this is an internal staff question, where if it followed ordinary and normative practices, that would be one thing. But what happens if there was a departure? And you decided $36,000 would go to just one organization that really wasn't doing anything in Shelburne? That's the mechanism that we have to put in place.
I think as a,
Just, Mike, I'm sorry.
I think as a member of the Social Service Committee, I'd feel more comfortable if there was more, $5,000 and below, maybe we can give out, but anything above that, we come and we have a conversation about that.
We need a
Does
policy.
that seem
We need-
reasonable?
Yeah, I think that that's really what I'm saying is that, I think Joe and Peter need to come up with
Yeah.
that list of the breakdown so that we know what it is.
Joe, we're here tonight. I think it's okay for us to go forward to vote on this item, but I would suggest that in
agree.
the future that we give staff, and you and Peter in particular, time to work with the Social Services Committee to come up with a mechanism that makes sense to go forward in a way that expedites matters
Yep.
and is fair to the Shelburne community.
So then I think the motion, if you're gonna go with their recommendation, instead of coming from the community fund, would come from the annual social services fund,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I was confusing.
Okay.
So I'd entertain a motion authorizing the use of $1,000 from the Social Service Committee Fund to fund one Shelburne meal route for 2 weeks for $500, and to fund the restaurant ticket meal program for seniors at the Dutch Mill Restaurant for $500.
So moved?
Moved by Jerry,
Second.
seconded by Josh. Any further discussion? Thank you for all the work you do. All in favor?
Aye. I have a question, if I
Please,
may,
before we move
of
on.
Peter. Peter, I'm not sure which page, on your account, Select Board expense and discretionary account status, under Shelburne Community Fund, I have not been able to understand why the budget figure totals 6,500.
Community fund is a fund that rolls over each year, so the budget column there was what our beginning balance was going into the year and what we were budgeting to spend out of it, $2,000 out. The committee opted to spend more than $2,000 out of it, which was fine. Those expenses were all approved. So it's really just a comparison of what we started out the year with for a plan and then what actually happened next to it. So that fund does roll over every year.
Right, they spent 5350 and we ended up with 2. We
And actually,
transferred-
yeah, actually, there's another transfer to the Shelburne Rec Department for scholarships that was approved, I think, at the same time the Shelburne Craft School scholarship was approved.
Correct.
It hasn't happened, so.
Where
they'll
I'm
end up with
having
1,000 in
difficulty
that.
is subtracting from 7350, I don't know where we get 6,500.
Well, the budget, we're going into this fiscal year that we just completed with a fund balance in the community fund of 5350. The budget assumed we would spend 2,000 out of it. That was just the best estimate. The committee spent more than that, so the actual is what was actually spent.
Okay, that's where the
So-
1350 comes from.
Right.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't figure that out on my own.
All right, so our next item is item number 11, consider amending the local match contribution from 10 to 20% for the Irish Hill sidewalk grant. And Joe, I think I saw an extra number.
Yeah, well, for the one I put at your desk, I fixed that typo. So Dean is preparing our grant application, which is due on Friday, and realized that the motion that was passed by the Select Board was with a 10% match, and that's my fault. It's hard to remember which grant has 10% and which grants have 20%, but this would require a 20% local match. So I think for the record and for the completion of our grant application, if it would behoove us if the Select Board passed this new motion. Hopefully that doesn't change your opinion of whether or not you want to go for the grant, knowing that it's going to cost you twice as much if it's received. But, and I apologize for that for a month ago.
Any comments,
It's
questions?
tempting. But I think we should.
Okay. Anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
I think Jerry's motion was to approve the town of Shelburne's grant application for a large-scale grant through V-Trans Bicycle and PED program for the Shelburne Falls Sidewalk Project along Falls Road, Irish Hill, and Thompson Road at the estimated cost of $838,762, with the town share estimated at $167,753. That's Jerry's motion, and seconded by Josh. Any discussion? Anyone here have any comments? It's actually a fairly large increase. It's an $80-some-odd thousand increase. But no one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 8, consider appointments to committees, boards, and commissions.
12, you may.
8, I'm sorry, 12. That's right, you're number 8.
As long as it's a summary.
I liked what I heard.
Yeah, I did too.
It's very good.
I thought you were going to bring wine, though, when I saw it, that you were on. All right, so, Joe, why don't you take this?
Sure, there's an open position now on the Planning Commission, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on whose seat this is, but Ben is here.
This is Don Posner's, I think.
Don's, you're right, thank you. So Ben was part of 3 or 4 people that applied. 2 or 3 months ago. At that time, Perry and Andrew were appointed. Ben, of learning of this opening, has resubmitted his application materials and is before the board. As far as the Champlain Solid Waste District, Tim Laux moved out of Shelburne and informed me that he would rather not continue on the board. So I don't have aspirations to serve long-term on the CSWD, but Shelburne definitely needs someone, a seat at the table for now. So if you do appoint me, my goal starting tomorrow will be to find a replacement to cover my seat. But I do think that we should have someone go to those meetings until that time. So I'm anticipating my appointment to be short-term, but to be appointed to represent Shelburne nonetheless.
But in appointing you, we would be appointing you starting immediately. And what's the term?
It's a 2-year term, I believe, yeah.
So since you're taking over for Tim, do you know when it's, I just want to make sure we have the right motion. Do you know when it's over?
I think the motion here will be sufficient.
Okay.
Then Joe can interpret it to mean for 1 week.
Yeah. All right.
So I didn't submit my application materials. I figured by now you know who you've got. But Ben's application materials, the same that he submitted probably 2 or 3 months ago, are
All right.
included.
So Joe, you just did your presentation. Anyone have any questions for Joe? Entertain a motion appointing Joe to the CSWD board as Shelburne's representative. Moved by John, seconded by
Second.
Jerry. Any discussions? Hearing none. Anyone here have anything to say? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, next is Ben Eisenberg to the Planning Commission. So, Ben, why don't you come up and usually I ask people to tell us something about themselves and why they want to serve on this particular committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ben Eisenberg, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me to interview for the opening on the Town Planning Commission. My family moved to Shelburne 5 years ago because we want our kids to be raised in the same wonderful community that my wife grew up in. With 2 little kids, we expect to be here for many years to come. To give you a little bit about my background, I am U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders' former finance director. And now as a consultant, I work with candidates and nonprofits to pursue policies that support working families. And I'd like to use my knowledge and background to contribute to our community. I recently spoke with Jamie, the chair of the Planning Commission, and I'm excited and hopeful for the chance to serve Shelburne and help develop a long-term plan that honors the special community that we live in. I would very much appreciate your vote tonight, and I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions, comments?
No, it's good to see you again. We had a wonderful back and forth the first time around, and I'm just delighted that you've maintained your interest in application, and it's good to see you here.
Thank you, Chair.
I agree. Thanks for sticking in there.
Thanks, Josh.
So one question I have is that, with your background, which is very impressive, by the way, it's, I don't want to underestimate what you've said as a background, but it seems to be, kind of specific to a political party. And, this board particularly, because it deals with, the myriad of things that come at it. How do you separate yourself from that role that you play every day in your life as a job and this type of committee work?
That's a very good question. And you're right. Working within the field that I do, I basically wear my politics on my sleeve. So you're right. Professionally, I understand what you're saying. On a town level, I don't think that making decisions for our community, interacting with people within our community, has necessarily has anything to do with any one of our individual political leanings. I think that what's important is to be able to work collectively, to be able to listen to opposing sides of an issue, and be able to come to a solution where most people are comfortable. But I certainly appreciate and understand your concerns that my professional background is largely political. However, in recent years, many of my clients are issue advocacy nonprofits, and they don't necessarily have a political bent as much as they have a focus on a particular issue.
Yeah. Makes
I hope
sense.
that helps answer your
Yeah,
question.
no, it does kind of clarify things, but, yeah. You know, I think that I'd like to discuss this in executive session with the group, and,
Motion for that?
No, I have a concern about that. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I can see in the past when we've had multiple candidates for a position, that it seemed reasonable to discuss it in executive session. I think Ben's here. I think, I'm not quite sure unless you believe that there are specific reasons that Ben is not appropriate for this position. It seems like historically, all of our appointments, if there's been a single opening and a single candidate, they have been made in public session. So I'm not really quite sure.
That's not correct historically, though.
Well, in my experience, and so I think if there are concerns about this appointment, I don't see why they couldn't be made in public session.
we can do it either way, but, so I'm concerned, as I stated, about the, you know, the focus of his professional background and being able to be a fair, you know, judge of situations. I think we have, you know, we've had a meeting here where Ben was quite vocal about, you know, certain subject matter in that, and, you know, approached the table and talked to me and Colleen directly. That wasn't a very professional conversation, I guess is the way I would term it. So it concerns me about, you know, his behavior maybe in the future. You know, we all learn from behavior things and so forth, but that's a concern for me. You know, I think if this were a board that had less impact on the greater town, my concerns would be less. But this board is a very important board and has, you know, great impact to the future of our community. So, and that's my concern. So,
I think that's a reasonable concern, and I think Ben has pretty well expressed his feeling that his professional life would be different than his position on this board. And I don't think these are questions that we really have asked of other candidates, even though I'm aware that some of the candidates we've considered in the past also have significant political professional activities. So I just think it's a different way of proceeding.
I'm going to disagree with your historical perspective because it has happened in the past.
Might there be a chance for me to address John's concern?
Absolutely, please.
John, you're specifically referring to the hearing where the board was considering removing Josh Dean from the select board. I did have very serious concerns about that proposal by the select board. I felt that it was, and I'm not trying to be melodramatic here, but I did feel that it was truly a threat to the democratic process and the possibility of undermining a democratically elected member of your board. That was the crux of my concern at the time that I addressed you personally. I have since had a personal conversation with Colleen and talked to her about amending the town charter to address this issue. Colleen was receptive to that, and I'll continue to follow up with Colleen about that. I did email you over the weekend, offer you an opportunity to speak personally. you did not take me up on that offer, and I respect that.
I just didn't have time.
I respect that. We all have we all have personal lives, and I wouldn't presume to have your personal time. However, I believe that was a unique circumstance in which the select board was considering something that I felt to be drastic and inappropriate at the time, and ultimately, I think your decision reflected the feelings of more than just me, but others within the community.
You know, Ben, if you had presented yourself that evening as you did just now, I would have no issue. None. Because you're being civil now.
See, I would hope that we've all grown, all of us, since that episode, and take to heart Gary's just comment. And my other set of feelings are these. The good thing is that you're partisan with a capital P. So there's no mistaking your potential partisanship. There could be a number of people who are being considered for appointments to committees whose partisanship is not disguised, surely, but not well known. I'd be a little more troubled by potential influence of that kind than I would by someone who wears his partisanship on his sleeve. Thirdly, we have an array of skills and expertise on town boards and committees. We have a lot of lawyers. We are fortunate to have engineers, biologists, and such. I think there's always room for what might be called just a down-home humanist. Someone who's got concerns about the people in the community, not that any other member of any other committee lacks those concerns, but who has some special aptitude for those kinds of problems, particularly as they relate to planning, especially as they relate to planning. In a community that wants to address these, has a need to address them, and is in various processes at the moment, as we've heard from Gail, addressing them. So my sense is that it's well that we had this discussion. I'm glad we had it in public. I think it all was deserved, and I appreciate your willingness to engage in it.
Thank you, Jerry.
Anyone else on the board have anything else they'd like to add? No. Anyone have anything else they'd like to add? Someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Ben Eisenberg to the Planning Commission for, I can't remember what the term is.
April 1st, 2020.
April 1st, 2020.
And I take that to mean for
Second.
terms starting tonight and ending April 1st, 2020.
Correct.
Moved by Josh, seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Aye, nay.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
I'm sorry,
I didn't hear that.
I didn't catch the yay and nay. Was that 2 to 2?
2 to 2.
Okay, so that's a no, I presume.
That's not a majority. It takes a majority of the board. It takes a majority, 3 out of 5.
Under such circumstances, in the absence of Colleen.
You're welcome to apply again.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
And you'll get another hearing if you apply again.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is item number 13, first reading for proposed amendments to the stop sign ordinance. Our ordinances have to be read in their entirety unless there's a motion and a approval to read by title only. And Joe, it's called the stop sign ordinance?
That's what it's called. It's a
Some-
subsection of our traffic ordinance, but it's called the stop sign ordinance.
Someone like to move to read it by the name only stop sign ordinance? Moved by Joe,
Yeah.
seconded by
Second,
Jerry.
yep.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. The amendment provides that and I'll just read it, it's very short. The Shelburne Select Board hereby orders that the stop sign ordinance be amended as follows by adding to paragraph 3, westbound and eastbound approaches to the Bay Road Railroad underpass, 2-lane traffic. The effective date of this amendment shall be upon passage, except as amended, the original ordinance adopted on July 13th, 1993 shall remain in full force and effect, adopted this 8th day of August 2017. And this is the first reading. Does anyone have any comments? We had this discussion, I think, the last meeting.
Move it along.
All right, so our next reading is scheduled for the second meeting in July, and the public hearing is scheduled for August 8th. All right, so I think we're all set on this one, right?
That's it.
Okay. Item 14, consider adopting the fiscal year 2019 general fund development process. Joe?
All right, so I think it's not required necessarily that that the select board adopt a budget process, but I think it helps us. And I'm recommending that instead of making any drastic changes, that we try to do what we did last year. I think it was a lot of under Jerry's idea about doing some of the +3 and -3, and a little bit. And I thought Jerry's idea worked well. And if we do it, the second year, maybe we'll work out some of the kinks that we had and make it even smoother. So, I guess my recommendation is to adopt it the way it's presented, and like I said, it's pretty much identical to what it looked like last year.
And you have the full day review on December 14th.
That was very well received by staff, so hopefully the board is willing to do that again.
My only comment is that I did receive some feedback that they thought it was a bit rushed from some people, and I'm not quite sure how we can ensure that everybody who's presenting and everybody who is involved in this feels that they do have time to present the information they'd like to present. So that's my only concern about the one-day
Specifically on that full day?
on that full-day session.
Well, like I said,
whether-
I think this being the second year, we can identify that, it wasn't flawless last year and try to work out a few of those kinks and make it a little bit smoother, so.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe and I also discussed, I remember, committees, certain committees for whom the one-day thing wasn't as useful, or the timing, wasn't it? We had several who had to wait, like Mary and whatnot, and I think that's just in the learning, as Joe mentions, I think that's in the learning curve. But it sure seems to have been a better use of everybody's time than the night after night after night. Yeah.
We'll do our best we can. I don't think any procedure is going to be perfect.
No, it's a lot of people and a lot of material to cover.
I mean, if you had beer, it'd be almost
Yeah.
perfect. Jessica would bring beer if she can. All right, so I would just suggest that even though we're adopting this, I don't even think we have to adopt this.
No, but I think it is helpful, and then it's also helpful just to, because it solidifies with staff that these are the deliverables, these are the expectations. So I realize it's not a requirement, but
Right.
I would
That's
I
good.
think that's
And it
important,
could be
yeah.
subject to change if, I
absolutely.
mean, if you get sick and you can't come to a meeting,
Yeah.
it's going to change.
No, I think it'd be important to adopt it, and also move.
Okay, Jerry moves to adopt the fiscal year 2019 budget development process as described in the July 11th, 2017 memorandum from the town manager. By the town manager.
Yeah, probably just one of those.
Moved by Jerry, seconded by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none, and please everybody know you can call in for these. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item. 15, receive fiscal year 2017 year-end estimated budget report. Peter? please, thank you.
And this report is posted online, so it's been posted since Friday.
What we presented here is just basically the summary as to where we're at. We've still had a lot of bills coming in for June, so I wouldn't hold to this estimate that I've got here. There's still revenues, grant revenues coming in, that sort of thing. So, but obviously our biggest challenge this year has been the legal expenses. I'm pretty confident in saying that we have definitely got some offsets on revenues and expenditures that were less than budget, so that I don't think we'll see our fund balance going down by the full amount of the legal expenditure. There's, again, it's just a lot of little places where costs were less than we had expected on, particularly on health insurance and those sorts of things. Again, in the highway budget, Paul was able to cut back on some of his projects, and unfortunately, he's one of the department heads that with the biggest list of projects that can have an impact on offsetting other negative variances. So credit to him for working with us on that. Beyond that, you've got the narrative there. If you have any specific questions on where we're at, again, it's really a very preliminary look at this point, since we do have a lot of adjustments and other expenditures coming in before we get a true picture as to where we'll end up. So.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments for Peter?
I thought it was a great summary.
Oh, it's a fantastic product, Peter, yeah. It's just really unbelievable what you do. I thought it was interesting that the passport revenue had performed so well. I wonder if does that include the period of time when Diana posted hours?
I think it was
Well,
just
it would
beginning.
include some months.
Yeah, but most of it was under their normal operations, but
Oh, okay.
that's been an area where they've exceeded budget pretty much every year. It's very busy with the passports they're processing. Pretty much every day, you'll see people in there doing that.
Because I was curious of whether there'd been a fall off from
Yeah.
having,
Yeah.
limit. I think she made a good decision, but boy, that's a significant.
It's been a good revenue source for sure.
Yeah.
Consistently.
I think, the post office, because of staffing, doesn't do them. And
They stopped everything?
they only do them periodically.
And there are very long lines.
Right, so
On
they're,
occasion, yeah.
they're required by law to do them, but they now, manage that by, doing them only so often,
Yes, so
like
many
once a
hours in the
week, or,
afternoon.
right, and it's very limited, so this, lends itself nicely to what we were able to do here.
I
Peter,
commented one day to Jim there, and I said, just send them down to the town office.
do you have a sense
Just down the
of,
road.
sorry, no, do you have a sense of the order of magnitude of outstanding things for June? I mean, are we talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens? Where,
Obviously, we've got June bills coming in, utility bills and things like that aren't reflected there yet, but we do have some grant revenues. We've got a highway paving grant that we've submitted for. We'll get it coming in. So I'm kind of thinking, just gut feeling they would be kind of a wash. I don't see a dramatic change one way or the other at this point, but I might be surprised with something that was unexpected. But we're still combing the numbers and making sure all the transfers, and all of those that take place, get put in, so.
okay.
I was just gonna say, I think everyone knows, Peter and, Paul Goodrich also, but Peter especially, a lot of credit. I think that, I think we were all anticipating that it wasn't gonna end perfectly this year, but to be honest with you, I thought we weren't gonna do as well as we did, and a lot of credit to Peter in the way that he manages the budget, and that still brought it in, not in pretty good shape, in my opinion, so.
Well, I
thank
think
you,
even
Peter.
our department heads, when Joe sends out a memo that says we've got to cut back, I think they all took it seriously. I mean, Betsy Saplicki, the rec budget, not a big budget, but I know she was looking at where she can save. So, I mean, pretty much across the board, I think the department heads were trying to do their best to back off on projects that they could postpone or whatever. So, again, it's a credit to them too, I think.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, item 16, consider executing documents from the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank related to the $970,000 loan for the Quint apparatus for the fire department. Joe, it's right here. Right?
There.
The resolution certificate?
Yeah, I don't know if,
I'm not reading it. out loud.
These are the required documents from from the bond bank. We should be have the quint in our possession, I would think, maybe by the end of this month.
Yeah.
So,
First of August.
and the bond bank goes out typically to auction in early August. And this is just your final commitment that we are going to be part of this summer series. So there's 2 places for the entire board to sign, and I think 2
I'm
other
just taking
places
a
for
look to
just the
make sure
chair.
it says $970,000. About 5 years ago,
970.
I was reading one of these, and I found a mistake, and it was off by like $50,000. Oops. So, ever since then, I like to read them quickly. All right, so does anyone have any other comments on this?
No.
All right, so let's, someone like to make a motion?
I'll move. Are we just executing, or are we moving?
Executing the documents.
Okay.
We've already approved this.
I'll move that we execute the documents as presented.
All right, moved by Jerry, seconded by
Second.
Josh. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, tell you what, so we don't forget. Well, maybe we ought to do it later since this came flying off. There it is. And I'll just pass them down for everybody, okay? Okay, I'll pass it down this way, okay? You guys sign it, and we'll move on to the bulletproof vest grant. So, want a grant application for 4 bulletproof vests, right?
That's what the police department wants, and the grant will cover half the cost of the vest. Obviously, these are mandatory pieces of equipment for our police department. So, per the charter, the board must approve all grant applications, so here it is.
All right, no one has any questions? So I entertain a motion approving the Shelburne Police Department's grant application for 4 bulletproof vests.
So moved.
Moved by John, seconded by
Second.
Josh. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Next item, 18. Consider approving a wastewater allocation request for Rice Lumber.
Sorry, I'm trying to find my memo from Chris, but usually these are pretty pro forma. Here it is. But this one has a little bit of a twist to it. I don't know if you had a chance to review this.
Yeah.
So the ordinance talks about how the allocation capacity is not transferable, but this is a unique situation where the lots have been kind of chopped up and redivided. So I think it makes sense to allow Rice Lumber to have the current allocation that's been provided to them be put towards Lot 1 and 2, along with the additional 252 gallons that they are requesting. So the motion is twofold. I don't have it in front of me. Oh, here it is to consider the motion to grant the additional gallonage and authorize that the current amount go towards the new lots 1 and 2. So I don't know if there's any questions there, but I think Chris's memo was pretty clear.
Was good. Someone like to so move what Joe just said?
So moved.
Moved. Okay, moved by John, second
Second,
by Jerry. Any further discussion?
I do have a quick comment.
Sure.
It raises an interesting question, though, about how related the ownership is from one generation of lot to the next. I mean, in this case, it's all one family, but it might be worthwhile when there's any time available to think about it, to give some consideration to a policy in any future case of this, of which there could be others. In my sense is they're abandoning one allocation and they're simply being reassigned the same allocation back, so I understand.
Did they pay the amount for the first allocation, and that's why they're not just applying again?
I guess I'd look back on the record if they, I'm assuming that they paid for the current amount that they have.
Right.
But the allocation follows the property.
Yes.
In this case, the property is disappearing and being re,
Well, yeah, I think it's
Packaged.
an interesting
It
question
is a
there.
very
The ownership
interesting
is not changing.
As far as we know.
Yeah, well, as far as we know. I mean, that's my point about
Right,
policy.
okay, I understand you.
As far as we know, the ownership hasn't changed, in which case property change is moot. So it's an interesting question. I think Chris has addressed it, exactly correctly, and agree with your recommendation. I don't have any issue with it, but it does raise an interesting question. A little bit along the lines of the question John raised about skinny pancakes at the museum. And while several of these don't have a lot of priority, they, at some point, we might think a little bit about it.
That's a good point, real good
I'm
point.
not a lawyer, but this is a kind of an interesting one, given scarcity of the resource. Yeah.
I could see further developments now that you bring it up. It's actually kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
All right, any more
You
comments
don't
on
want to
this?
hear that from a lawyer, and it's fun to think about. Ka-ching, ka-ching.
Get your ears covered.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so,
Oh,
John, if you could sign these. And then, we have two potential executive session items, one for the union and one in regard to the railroad. We will not be coming back. I thought there might have been an executive session earlier and a vote, and that didn't happen. So you'll be able to punch out after we do our motions if they're successful. Yes, please, just come up to the mic and identify yourself, and how are you?
I'm well, thank you. My name's Jennifer Brown, and I thought I was going to be on the agenda tonight. I spoke to somebody who I sent you an email, and it was forwarded to somebody who builds the agendas. I was a candidate for the Cemetery Commission. Did that? Oh, no worries.
The
You
next
guys-
meeting,
I didn't know.
Oh, it's okay.
Unless you want to.
I can
You know,
song and dance for you
apologize-
guys.
I
Wait a
apologize
second,
that-
you're here.
for the what?
Unless someone
Cemetery Commission.
objects.
Unless
We
you
did have
object,
it
and
on
I
the
know you're
agenda
running a
of
little over
appointments
and-
to-
Yeah, do we have to cover her political aspirations?
I will be succinct.
Why don't you tell us something, first of all, is everyone comfortable going forward?
Yeah, I would be. I mean, we
I
have the
mean,
vacancy
is,
and.
from a procedural, is it
From a
okay?
procedural standpoint, we would be continuing item number 12, consider appointments to CBCs. It was noticed, so people knew that we would be considering appointments. And this was just a clerical error.
Correct. Yeah,
That
it was.
didn't get on, and I would hate for you to have to come back, you know.
You did your part,
I did come, yes.
so we should do our part.
Well, I appreciate the time, gentlemen, thank you. My
Okay.
name's Jennifer Brown. I grew up in Chittenden County, I grew up in Essex, left for a while, came back. My husband and family and I moved back here 3 years ago. I work for the state as an IT project manager, and I've sat in on one meeting so far with the Cemetery Commission, and already see that I might be able to add some of my IT and computer prowess to.
I'm pretty excited already, I
All
gotta tell you
right.
right now, 'cause we've had a lot of issues in that commission over teaching members
They say
how to
training,
use-
training has been an issue, and,
Yeah.
and maybe a little communication between some of your vendors. I worked for 20 years in printing and book publishing, so I've done a lot of purchasing, I've done a lot of contracting. I'm a very organized, efficient person. My kids are getting older, so I'm trying to get out and give a little bit more back to my community. I'm not a zoning board kind of gal. I'm kind of fascinated with the macabre, so when I saw the
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, oh, don't say it two more times. When I saw the opening, I was like, that would be a great fit for me, just because I am the girl that would, or the woman that would go and have, picnics in the cemetery in Ithaca, New York when I did my undergrad. And when I lived in Boston, my husband and I lived near a beautiful cemetery, Forest Hill Cemetery, and we would take friends.
I know that cemetery.
Do you? It's a beautiful cemetery, and
is.
actually, I'm fascinated with the whole, how cemeteries are actually, they were built to preserve green space so that people could actually, enjoy living in the city, but still get to go and see their relatives and see green spaces. I would go do gravestone rubbings and did some of my undergraduate work when I was in London on the Black Death. So I'm not, into digging up people, but I'm fascinated with that stuff. So, and I did just come from a memorial service, so, but I do dress in black all the time.
I think you found the perfect.
I think like I said, when I saw that you were looking for somebody to sit on that commission, I was like, wow, thank you.
I think you should take a picture, front page of the paper.
And my husband works for the
Old
Shelburne News, Garrett. Do you know Garrett? Okay, I wasn't know who was the Shelburne News person. So
Let me ask Joe something, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Joe, I know this is taking you by surprise. Before we do anything here, I just want to confirm that
We do
there
have
is an opening.
There is an opening.
There is an
There
opening.
absolutely is an opening.
Yes,
All right, but you don't know what the term is.
it's a 2-year term, I think.
I'd have to go check, and it'll take me 60 seconds.
2 years when we talked to Pete Gudgeon.
And there you go.
We'll just phrase the motion. I would entertain a motion to
2
appoint
years sounds right.
Jennifer Brown for position on the Shelburne Cemetery Commission for the open seat for the term that ends at the time that open seat ends.
Perfect.
So if it's a year and a half, it's a year and a half. If it's 2 years, it's 2 years.
I'll take it.
Thank you very much for stepping up to the plate.
Yes, please.
I'm a
Yeah.
project manager. If I don't say something, no one will, right?
Right.
No, we appreciate you
I
coming
think you're
in.
cool.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. I try.
Any questions for
Yes,
Edmund?
do any of you have questions?
The item says CVCs plural, so.
Okay, so I said I'd entertain the motion. Did you move?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jerry. That's for the people recording, that's why I say it.
understand. I was on my fraternity board when I was in college, so I love the moving and the pass the gavel if you want to talk kind of thing, so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
stepping up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we already had that on the agenda. Otherwise, it would have been a little tough.
Oh, good for you.
All right, so entertain a motion pursuant to 1 VSA 313, finding premature general knowledge would place the select board or person involved at a substantial disadvantage in regard to negotiations with the New England Police Benevolent Association. I'll just do that one at a time.
So moved.
We all know we're involved in negotiations with them. Moved by Jerry, seconded by John.
Second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And consider a motion to enter executive session to discuss negotiations with the New England Police Benevolent Association and invite the town manager.
So moved.
Moved by John,
Second.
seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain.
This is the benevolent.
Oh, this is the benevolent one?
I'm
sorry.
trying to make it easy.
Okay, all right, okay. Aye.
Okay. Next one. Motion pursuant to 313, that premature general knowledge would clearly place the select board or person involved at a substantial disadvantage in regard to litigation involving the town of Shelburne and Vermont Railways. And I think you're going to recuse yourself, not abstain, right? So Josh has recused himself.
Moved and
Moved.
seconded.
Moved by Jerry, seconded by John. I like that you could do both move and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And entertain a motion to enter executive session to discuss litigation involving the town of Shelburne and Vermont Railways and invite the town manager and the town attorney. Moved by Jerry, I heard,
Yes.
seconded by John. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and Josh recused himself from that, too.
Thanks, Jessica.
Jessica, thank you so much for coming.